For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 80:17. It began with silence, but not the silence that comforts or cradles. No, this silence had weight. It hung in the air like a curtain soaked in oil. It didn't rest, it pressed. And when Claire first crossed the threshold into that rotted chapel of wood and shadow, the silence met her like a breath held far too long. She had come alone, not by choice, but by fate's strange pull, a chain woven through bloodlines and stitched with memories forgotten on purpose. Her grandmother had died 3 weeks prior, a woman long severed from family ties, long buried beneath whispers and warnings. Claire had only one vague recollection, a crooked house wrapped in fog, and a woman who muttered prayers in a language that left ash in the air. The letter came scrawled in ink darker than coal, written on paper that smelled of cedar, salt, and something ancient. No return address, no name. Just instructions, 3 nights, no more, no less. Do not leave, do not light the 3rd candle. Listen carefully. And a key, cold, heavy, wrought in iron that looked black in the light and red in the dark. Its head was carved like a screaming mouth. Claire had laughed at first, nervously. She almost didn't go. But something inside, deep beneath her skepticism, buried under modern logic, knew. Something called her, like a hymn you haven't sung since childhood but still know by heart. The house was not simply old. It was ancient, a thing that stood not in spite of time, but because of it. It sat at the edge of Blackvale Forest, where the trees leaned too far inward and the wind never reached. Ivy did not grow here. It infested. The vines were tight as nooses around the chimney. The moss pulsed on the walls as if the stones beneath were still breathing, and not once did she see an animal, not a single bird, not a single branch move. Even the insects seemed to know better. Inside, the temperature dropped as she crossed the doorway, though the hearth glowed faintly. The air smelled of rotting parchment, dried blood, and lavender left too long in the dark. The walls were paneled in wood so dark it absorbed the light, like it had grown tired of reflecting anything back. That first night she explored cautiously. Room by room, she opened dust, choked drawers, and found photographs she didn't recognize, women with blurred faces and stitched smiles, a child's rocking chair, unmoving despite the creaking floor, a cracked crucifix that hung upside down over the dining room table. She didn't sleep that night, couldn't. At precisely 2:06 a.m. the whisper came, not from a mouth, not from a voice, but from the walls, from the shadows, from somewhere inside the silence itself. Stay, 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 soft as breath, cold as bone. Claire spun around, flashlight trembling. But there was no one, only that long, narrow hallway that led toward the basement. A hallway that seemed longer now. A trick of perspective, surely. But still, she shut the door. She slept fitfully. When morning finally broke, she played the audio recorder she'd left by the bed, just white noise until minute 46. A shuffle, a breath, then a voice, no, a memory of a voice, rasped through the statics. "We remember you." Claire dropped the recorder, her breath hitched, something crawled inside her lungs that didn't belong. She coughed, and a sliver of thread came up, black, waxy, and frayed like it had been soaked in oil. This wasn't just a house, it was a mouth. It remembered her blood, it recognized her. There's a spiritual sickness that clings to bloodlines, the kind the world calls generational trauma, but the scriptures speak of in sterner terms. The iniquity of the fathers shall be visited upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Say Exodus 20:5. What her grandmother had started, Claire was meant to finish, whether she chose it or not. That second evening, as dusk crept like bruises across the sky, Claire noticed something else. The shadows didn't match the light. The lamp on the hallway wall cast a shadow backward, but the outline on the ground leaned toward her. Even when she moved, it stayed, unattached, unyielding, watching. She lit candles, 3 of them, though she hesitated before the third. The warning in the letter returned like a knock in her skull. Do not light the 3rd candle. But in that moment, fear of darkness overrode fear of prophecy. She struck the match. Flame bloomed. And from the floorboards below her feet, something sighed. Not the sigh of wind, not the creak of old timber, but the exhale of something that had been waiting a long, long time to be remembered. But if you will not listen, my soul will weep in secret for your pride. My eyes will weep bitterly and run down with tears. Jeremiah 13:17. The second night swallowed her. Not gently, not with the soft hush of sleep. It took her with teeth, gnawed at her peace, tore shreds of clarity from her mind like parchment in a storm. Claire didn't sleep. She couldn't. Not with the whisper curling at the edges of her perception like smoke under a locked door. Not with the eyes she now felt behind every shadow. There's a madness that doesn't scream. It whispers. It hums. It waits. The hallway near the staircase had changed. Again. The wallpaper, once faded yellow, now bore faint symbols, spirals within spirals, hands with no fingers, eyes without pupils. She tried to scrub them clean, desperate for something normal, but they didn't rub off. In fact, the longer she stared, the deeper they sank, beneath the paper, into the wall itself, as if the house had grown tired of hiding what it really was. And always her ears itched. It began subtly, a low buzz like a fly near the window. But it grew, a pressure behind her eardrums, swelling with each passing hour. At times, she could swear she heard breathing. Not hers, not human, something damp, patient. Then at 2:47 a.m. it happened. The air shifted. Warmth slid across the floor like blood seeping through stone. A smell rose, old iron, wet moss, and something burnt. The wood beneath her feet began to creak in rhythm, as if responding to something beneath it. Then the chanting began, not loud, not musical, a low, guttural vibration. Dozens of voices, male, female, and something else, layered in horrific harmony, uttering syllables not born from any language she knew. The words didn't enter her ears. They pierced them. She dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled. Her nails dug into the floorboards. Desperation gripped her like a vice. She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the wood, praying she was hallucinating. But from deep beneath the floor, from the belly of the earth, something answered. She fed us once, and she will feed us again. But Claire screamed, but the sound felt foreign, as if it echoed before it ever left her mouth. The floor was pulsing now, not metaphorically. Literally, like a heart buried deep in the soil, pushing up warmth with each sickening throb. She crawled away from the voice. Her body didn't feel like her own. Her joints ached, her spine burned. And when she finally looked down at her hands, she saw what she feared most. They were dirty. Dirt under her nails, small cuts on her palms. She had been digging, but she didn't remember doing it. There are things passed down through generations that no one talks about. Not curses, not ghosts. Agreements, sacrifices signed in silence. We call them old blood, but the scriptures have a clearer word. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Proverbs 6:27, Claire felt it now, the inherited fire, and it was burning from the inside out. She ran to the attic, searching for answers. Her legs barely carried her. The steps creaked in strange rhythms, like a lullaby played in reverse. Each step she took sent whispers swirling around her ears. Growing louder the higher she climbed. The attic door opened with a moan like a dying animal. The air inside was cold, but not natural. It was funeral cold. Still, expectant inside were boxes, ancient, water-stained and wrapped in wire. She tore through them with shaking hands, old Bibles with pages scratched out. Photographs with eyes burned black. Journals filled with ink so thick it cracked when she touched it. And then, buried beneath a moth-eaten quilt, a mirror, cracked, tall, bound in rope, as if someone had tried to seal it away. And carved at the top in trembling script, they whisper louder in the dark. Claire should have turned away, but some twisted magnetism pulled her toward it. She wiped the dust away, looked into the fractured glass, and in it, she did not see herself. She saw her grandmother, and behind her grandmother, the cellar. It was open, it was waiting, and there were children, but not like any children she had ever known. Their eyes were sewn shut, their mouths were hollow, their skin was translucent, stretched too tight over bones that didn't seem to belong. They didn't speak, they hummed that same song from beneath the floorboards, a ritual, a requiem, a summoning. One by one, they turned to her. One by one, they raised their tiny hands and pointed, not at the mirror, not at the house, at her. Her stomach lurched. It wasn't sickness, it was something deeper, a knowing. Something had been planted in her. Something had been passed down. In the distance, the grandfather clock struck 3, and the whisper returned, louder now, more distinct, carving itself into her thoughts like nails through parchment. It begins again. She collapsed, weeping, not from fear, from recognition. Some part of her had always known this would happen. The sleepless nights as a child, the echoing dreams, the way her mother used to flinch at shadows. This wasn't new. It was her inheritance, her blood. She stumbled back down the stairs, and the cellar door was open. Not cracked, not ajar, wide open. The blackness inside didn't reflect the light. It devoured it. There was no wind. But still, the shadows beneath the door seemed to breathe. Something waited there. Something remembered her. And the house of the thing the house had become was no longer passive. It had recognized its own. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. 2 Thessalonians 2:7, it is written that there are mysteries hidden not from man, but for man. Truths buried beneath centuries of silence, wrapped in symbols, obscured by ritual, and passed from generation to generation in whispers. But what happens when the whisper becomes a voice? When the ancient symbols awaken and begin to demand what is owed? Claire had passed the point of resistance. There was no more denial, no logic left to shield her. The house had pulled her into its rhythm, woven her into its breathing walls, and fed her soul to something older than memory. She was no longer an intruder. She was the offspring of an oath. On the 3rd day, the forest had moved again. Where once the trees had kept their distance, they now pressed against the windows, bark grinding against glass like fingernails scraping bone. Their branches curled like blackened arms. Light no longer reached the windows, not fully. It came in gray, filtered, as if filtered through cloth soaked in sorrow. She stood in the kitchen, her hands numb, staring at a bowl of water that refused to ripple. The reflection showed her eyes, but not her own. They were older, darker, watching her from inside her own skull. And then a smile, not hers, formed in the water. She screamed, shattered the bowl. But the smile remained, etched faintly on the inside of the glass. The cellar door, once sealed by silence, now remained open like a gaping wound. No more resistance, only trembling obedience. Her steps descended with the weight of inevitability. Each creaking plank beneath her feet groaned like a voice too tired to speak. There is a point when dread becomes ritual, and ritual becomes worship, and worship becomes debt. The cellar was not built. It was birthed. The stone walls blood condensation that smelled of ink and decay. The air buzzed with invisible insects, and the moment she crossed the threshold, her ears popped as if reality itself thinned. Symbols were carved into the stone, deeply. Not by hand, but by something with claws, spirals bleeding into crosses. Eyes weeping downward, mouths opened wide as if in perpetual screaming prayer. And names. Too many names. The walls were filled with them, etched in blood and ash. Claire's fingers brushed over them involuntarily. They were warm, and near the base of the back wall, newly engraved, not in blood, but in fresh, living flesh, was her own name. Claire Elizabeth Wren. Her breath caught, Her knees buckled. In the center of the cellar, a stone table sat like an altar. Atop it, a wooden bowl filled with teeth. Not random, children's teeth. Baby molars, cracked and yellowed, arranged in a perfect spiral. The spiral from the hallway. The spiral from the dreams. Beside the bowl lay a locket, gold, tarnished, humming faintly. She opened it. Inside was a photo, but not of her grandmother, not even an old family portrait. It was her, Claire, standing in this very room, her eyes rolled white, her mouth open, mid-chant, her hands raised over the bowl. She hadn't taken this photo, no one had, and yet here it was, as if time had bled forward and backward all at once. She dropped it, gasping. Her stomach convulsed. Something inside her was reacting, moving. She backed into the wall, but the stone felt alive. It pulsed, it trembled. And then, as if drawn by unseen hands, the shadows surrounding the altar began to move. Slowly, silently, from them reflections emerged. Not flesh, not phantoms. Reflections of women, eyes vacant, mouths sewn, faces blurred like smeared paint. One by one they emerged. Some wore veils, others wore crowns of twine. All were bleeding from their palms, and each bore the same sigil carved into their chest, a spiral inside a crying eye. Claire wanted to scream, wanted to run, but something deeper than fear rooted her in place. And then came him. It did not enter, it simply was a presence, a silhouette made of oil and teeth and dripping parchment, 10 feet tall, boneless, faceless. It towered over the altar, hovering without motion, a cloak of darkness swallowing the space around it. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It simply watched. Claire's breath stopped. Her heart slowed. Her knees buckled as every part of her recognized it. She fell prostrate, not from reverence, from compulsion. And then the whisper returned, but this time not in her ear, not around her, from inside her bones. Let us live again through you. The women in white began to hum. The sound shook the cellar, a deep, ancient tone that seemed to melt the air. The altar pulsed with heat. The bowl of teeth began to spin, slowly at first, then violently. The photo burst into flame without being touched, and Claire's mouth opened, not by her own will. She chanted, words she didn't know, a language she never learned, a prayer she had inherited. The sacrifices of our mothers are not forgotten. The gate must open. The blood must answer. The vessel returns. The price is honored. Blood dripped from her eyes like tears. Her fingers split. Her legs gave out. And the shadow leaned in. For the first time, it touched her chest. Not with hands, with memory. And in that moment, she saw everything her grandmother at this same altar, offering a stillborn infant to the pit. Her great-grandmother sewn into the wall as the price for breaking the ritual. Her mother, who fled the house with Claire in her womb and paid for it with 20 years of silence and sickness. And now, Claire, the blood price returned. All debts come due. The whisper inside her reached a crescendo. It screamed with reverence. It celebrated. She screamed too, not in terror, in release. And I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease. Isaiah 13:11, what returns from the graveyard of memory is not always what was buried. The house stands, but something inside it has changed. It breathes now, slow, methodical, like lungs awakening after centuries of sleep. And when the wind presses against the walls, which it now does after years of stillness, it doesn't whistle, it moans. The townspeople avoid Black Veil. They say the trees are growing wrong. They curve in unnatural spirals, always bending toward the house, as if drawn to something warm and wet beneath its foundation. Birds don't nest near it. Deer flee its shadow. Even wolves, creatures of silence and blood, keep their distance. But sometimes, late at night, travelers on the road hear it, a humming, chilled-like, beautiful, terrible. Claire has not been seen since the third night. The one who came to inherit, the one who thought she was merely visiting. the one whose name was written in blood before she was born. A week after her disappearance, a search party entered the forest. The sheriff led them, along with 2 volunteers and a priest. The air grew colder as they approached the estate, though it was summer. Their watches stopped ticking. Compass needles spun like dervishes. Birds vanished. Then they saw the house, and it saw them. Its windows blinked just once, like slitted eyes adjusting to the light. The front door creaked open before they knocked. The threshold seemed deeper now, wider, like stepping into a mouth. Inside, everything was clean. No dust, no webs, not even footprints. It was as though the house had been reset. Except for one thing, the mirror in the main hallway. Tall, uncracked, framed in twisted brass, and nailed directly into the wall, as if someone feared what might crawl out of it. The priest approached it first. He whispered a prayer, but his voice failed him. It didn't echo. The air around the mirror consumed sound. The others followed, unease thick in their throats. And then the mirror shimmered. For a moment, they didn't see themselves. They saw her, Claire, standing in the cellar, her arms outstretched, her mouth open, her eyes burned black. Behind her, the children, eyeless, singing. Above her, the shadow, now fully formed, a deity of sorrow built from bone and void and regret. Then the reflection vanished. The men turned away, shaken, desperate to leave. But the cellar door was already open, wide, inviting, and from it a soft chanting rose like incense. The priest resisted, refused. But the others descended. They were found 3 days later. One drowned in a nearby well, his body twisted backwards, mouth sewn shut with black thread. One was discovered in his home, silently writing spirals on the walls with his own blood. The third simply disappeared. All that remained was his voice, captured faintly on a recorder found in his abandoned truck. She's not gone. She's listening now. What happens when a soul no longer belongs to itself? When a spirit, generation after generation, is slowly carved and hollowed like a vessel prepared for occupation. Claire had not been taken. She had been given. The ritual was not an event. It was a transformation. You see, her body still walks the house. Sometimes at twilight, a silhouette can be seen in the attic window. A woman with no reflection. Sometimes humming, sometimes weeping, sometimes both. She no longer screams. She doesn't need to. The house does it for her, in the walls, in the floor, in the dreams of those who wander too close. And if you dare enter the cellar now, you will find the altar is gone. The bowl, the teeth, the ashes, vanished. But in the far wall, carved freshly, is a new inscription. Let the blood remember. Below it, a name, Claire Wren, the final daughter. But Claire is not gone. She speaks now, not in language, but in sound, in static, in dreams. In flickers of light bulbs and in the cold breath that grazes your neck when you're alone. Because the ritual was not just about her, it was about what came through her. There are spirits that haunt homes. But there are other spirits, darker, older, that become the home. She is one of them now. The house is not cursed. It is reborn, rewritten, sanctified by the screams of women silenced for centuries. Claire was the last sacrifice, the final seal. The gate has opened, and it doesn't close. You may not believe this. You may say it's just a story, a tale told around bonfires and shadows. But if you drive past Black Veil one night and the trees seem to whisper your name, if you hear a girl humming behind your ear, even though no one is there, if you see your reflection blink after you've looked away, it means she's already found you. It means the house remembers, and it always remembers the ones who listen. So don't listen. Don't follow the voice. Don't enter the cellar, because once you go down, you forget how to scream, THEEND, or perhaps the beginning of yours. Let me know if you'd like a dark cover image, an audiobook narration tone, or expansion into a full novella or screenplay. This story is ready to grow even deeper.